Welcome everybody to the Paranormal Perspective. This is VJ Prasad coming back to you for episode 10. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. So first of all, before I get into everything, thank you everybody for coming back tonight. I know it's been a bit of a long haul since my last episode. Always remember, the more emails you send me with more stories, the quicker I can get ones out to you. So if you have your own paranormal experiences to share, please email me. That's info@paranormalperspective.com. You can also find me at www.paranormalperspective.com. Also on Facebook as The Paranormal Perspective. Lots of ways to reach me, even on Twitter. That's VJP1982. Definitely let me know what you've got to share. Also, if you're in the southern Alberta area, Calgary specifically, and you are looking for a paranormal investigation, I work with a team called Cappy here in Calgary. That's southern Alberta. You can find us at cappy7.ca. Lots of ways to find us. If you need any help with anything, just let us know, and we would love to get back to you and hear what you've got to talk about. So thank you everybody for joining me tonight for another episode of the Paranormal Perspective. I am back. Well, jumping right into it. So I got another story for you tonight. This one comes from Rebecca. So she has a situation of her own to share, and previous reading through this one, just so I don't trip over my tongue too much while reading it to you, it's definitely got some creep factor to it. This one is, well, you know what, I'll get right into it. It's got a lot of reasons why it's kind of scary, and I'll get right into it after we read it. All right, so Rebecca says, I will try to remember and be as descriptive as best as I can, and your input is always appreciated. Here it goes. I was in Toronto visiting relatives one winter for the holidays. One evening, we all sat down for dinner, and I sat across my then 28-year-old cousin. I remember serving myself some food when I suddenly felt a heaviness in my chest. I stared down at my plate and had only one thought. He is so young, and he hasn't even lived his life yet. I looked up at my cousin briefly, but I couldn't look him in the eye. I knew something was going to happen. It is as if something were whispering in my ear, saying that his time here with us was coming to an end, and that as a person who lives such a virtuous life, so must he move on as he was needed somewhere else. I continued to stare down at my plate, but I really wanted to yell across to him from where I sat and tell him that he didn't have much time left. It was also as if the moment I put those words together in my head, I forgot how to speak them. Something was prohibiting me from warning him. The rest of the evening continued that way, with the urge to warn him and protect him and even save him, but the mental block to do so was just so overwhelming. Later that night, I was happy to get some sleep and forget about the evening. I thought that I was just imagining it all. I remembered having a few bad dreams and waking up shortly, looking around the clutter-filled guest bedroom, and feeling secure again with the familiarity of my surroundings and falling back to sleep. After some time, I was jolted awake. I could not move. I could not breathe. I opened my eyes wide, though I felt like they were still closed. I could see the ceiling, but I couldn't turn or I couldn't make a sound. I was stuck. I was cognitive enough to realize that I was probably in another sleep paralysis state, and so I willed myself to wake up. But then beside me, I felt it. I felt a dark presence. To this day, I can't even describe what it felt like. It's like I felt it nearing towards me. From this dark presence, I sensed that it was not a person, but a benchmark of evil that was made up of collective of unspeakable sorrows of thousands of people over some long length of time, whose purpose was clearly to take something. At that moment, I still knew exactly where I was. I knew I was in Toronto. I was in my cousin's home, sleeping on a futon just inches off the ground. But the room was not that way, as if it had become dimensionless and never existed in the first place. There was no more walls and no mark of familiarity to settle my mind. If I moved slightly, I would fall off and keep falling and falling as there was no floor. This presence was like an abyss. I remember thinking that it felt like what I would perceive to be a black hole to be, sucking all the life and time and space it could into it. The only thing that kept me afloat was the dark presence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't talk. And so I sent a thought to it. My thought was, "What are you?" And it replied. It replied in a way that went beyond my understanding, and I can only sum it up as an experience of death. I asked it, "Are you here for me?" And it sent an image of me on the airplane ride to return home, as I am terrified of flying. It sent a thought back to me saying no. It also gave me an image that it would remain near me and my family for the next short while. Then I felt as if I was just forcefully and physically shoved awake and back into the reality that seemed so far away and unreal to me just a few short moments ago. I told a few friends of the experience I had the following morning. Blank stares and concerned looks all around. I thought it was just better to have a good time and forget about it. I was out with a few friends that evening, and one of them got a phone call and left the table. He came back with the color drained from him and said to me, "Your cousin is dead." My cousin died that evening from a freak accident of choking on his food. It was at the same table in the same kitchen from where I had last seen him the night before. The way our family dealt with it was we gathered together and talked. Many of these people were friends of his, and many shared their own experiences of nightmares in the few nights prior to my cousin's death, and we all felt this dark presence in some form or another. A few days leading to his 1-year death anniversary, I was back home and walking through a crowded place. Trying to make my way through the crowd, I glanced to my right while I was walking, and I saw my cousin standing there. There was no mistaking it. It was him. His round glasses, his silly smile. I pushed backwards to where he was standing, and of course, he was gone. A few nights after this, I fell asleep and woke up in another sleep paralysis. There, in the room, it was that same dark presence that I had felt the year before. Standing at the foot of my bed, but its strength was much weaker. The room had not changed into anything dimensionless and dark. It had remained the same. It had a warning for me, just a warning. And then I felt like I was shoved awake again. To this day, over 15 years later, I don't know what it was trying to warn me of, and I never experienced that presence again. I'm looking forward to hearing your input, and I can't wait. Rebecca. So, folks, as I said, it's a bit of a doozy, that one, because of the fact of what we're talking about here. This is, some of you have heard the term wraith or harbinger, a death omen, something like that. So many of you have heard this. A good way to call it, one of the most known names, a reaper. You know, the old Grim Reaper tales. It's a creepy story because what we're talking about is something that literally came to speak of a death in its way of speaking or communicating, but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about something that came specifically to talk or communicate to not just one, but multiple people who shared this experience to share a death approaching. And unfortunately, it was the death of a member of your family, and that's a hard one to take, because not only did it tell you, okay, so there's going to be a death in your family, you can't do anything about it. It came and said, I'm taking him, and you can't say a word, you can't do anything, all you get to do is know. That's a terrible burden, because there's nothing you can do about it. And also on top of it, you didn't actually know, you were guessing. Because based on what you were given, you had to put it together for yourself. There was no instruction manual on what was coming next. You had to figure it out for yourself. But before you could figure it out completely, then the worst thing that could happen happened, and you lost a member of your family. We are talking about something that sounds like a harbinger of death. Also, in some parts, you've heard, many people out there have heard the banshee. When you hear the banshee wail, you know that someone is going to die. That's the same type of thing, a death, a wraith or a death omen, something that's going to tell you of the death of a person off of this plane of existence. Perhaps one way one could even almost flip that feeling of despair and hopelessness that you felt, that it was a dark presence and then it was evil, may not even be that it was a dark and evil presence, but one could almost wonder, and again, many might have other theories, and I definitely would love to hear them because that's what this is about, but one might almost wonder, is it that you were feeling terrified from this evil presence? Or were you feeling what we all fear? What's the biggest reason people are afraid of death? It's because we do not know what comes next. Every single one of us wonders, even those who don't admit it. Some part of them wonders what happens next. We all have our beliefs. Some religious beliefs, some spiritual beliefs, some scientific beliefs, but everybody's got their own theory as to what happens next, but we do not know. Paranormal investigators like myself, why do we do what we do? Because we want some sort of answer, something to wonder or to hold on to, because we do not know. And as a species, finding answers is what we do. We try to find answers to everything, even though some things we can't answer. So that is one of them. So maybe it wasn't your feeling that, maybe you weren't feeling despair and sorrow, but you were feeling an emptiness of unknown. You were feeling the fear of not knowing what this thing was, because to say that maybe it was that, maybe it was death itself, one could almost wonder, you weren't afraid of it, you didn't know. And what's more scary than not knowing? If it was some evil presence with clear intent that it wanted to hurt you or harm you, your mind is going to tell you, okay, this thing has clear intent, it's going to hurt you and harm you. That's not what happened. What happens to a human being's mind when we can't figure something out is it tries to think of all scenarios. So you don't know what this dark presence is, and it's there, and you don't know what it's going to do. So your mind is going to go in 100 different directions trying to figure it out, which is even worse. Not knowing is far worse than knowing, because not knowing means you're going to try to think of every possible worst case scenario and take it further and farther than it even needed to go. And ultimately, not knowing is what might have even caused you that much more stress and made you feel that it was darker than it was. But again, we don't know. It's hard. I know it sucks having to keep saying it, but that's the truth, because it didn't hurt you or harm you, and for all we know, it was just there to let you know it was coming to take someone. It may have only been coming to tell you that's what it was going to do, but the other question is why? Why was it letting you? It wasn't even just you. As you said, multiple people shared one form of experience or another of the same thing, coming to tell you and them that it was here to take someone, but why? What was it that you needed to know? That's what's even worse, because it was not clear, it was cryptic. It's a puzzle that you had to figure out, and unfortunately by the time you figured it out, that was when your cousin had passed, and even still, you don't know why it was telling you. What was the reason? What was the purpose? Why did you need to know? And is there some reason? It let you know it was going to be there for a while, and you don't know why it was there, aside from the fact that it was possibly there to take someone, and yet still, was it coming to tell you that it was coming to take someone, or that someone was coming to take someone? So many different things, but we can never truly have an answer to that question, which is why we fear not knowing, why we fear death itself. We don't have the answers, and we're always looking, we're always seeking. Was this a reaper? Was this a wraith? Was it a banshee? Was it a harbinger of death? We can only wonder, and that is what is so creepy about it. What came to see you that night? What came to see them that night? And why? Why was it there? And truthfully, is it got more to tell you? Does it have more to tell them? Does it have more to tell us? Will we all see it at one point or another? Who really knows? It is a very big gap of knowledge that we have there, from knowing what comes after this life that we live. We all want to know, and many of us search for our own answers one way or another, but we won't know till the show is over. Then we get to find out what comes after this. Me personally, while I truthfully believe there is something after this, I do believe in an afterlife, and I do believe that there is another step. Truthfully, if the show was just over, the whole idea of doing paranormal investigation is moot. Because if the show is over, there's nothing. And that's why I do this, because I don't believe there's nothing. And I've had my own experiences, my own visual experiences as well, of seeing things that it's hard to understand, but they were there. And so you know there is something else. And just for those of you who have religious and spiritual beliefs, a soul doesn't die. It has to keep going. So for any of my scientific buffs who don't believe in the spiritual or religious, that's fine as well. Let's put it into another perspective. Well, what makes our bodies run? Energy. Can energy be destroyed? It cannot. It can only change forms, but it keeps going. Therefore, what happens when we pass on? That energy has to keep going. It can't just dissolve. So even from a scientific standpoint, it still seems to me that it's saying that we keep going somehow, some way, some form. We just don't know what that way is. So it is a very, very scary story in comparison to many of the ones that I've heard, just because you're dealing with the ultimate unknown. You're dealing with something that directly came to visit you, and it came to visit multiple friends. And these people, they all were able to say the same thing that you were. And so more than one person had this experience with a phantom of death of sorts. You can't really get much more terrifying than that. I cannot lie. Just because it is the biggest field of unknown of all, in comparison to ghosts, in comparison to demonic stuff, in comparison to anything. That's the end game. That's it. And in that sense, you literally touched the ethereal plane. You felt it. So I don't know if some people might find that to be exciting. Some people might find that to be absolutely terrifying and wish it never happened. Me personally, I'm not sure. I don't know how I would feel or react to that, just because that's some pretty heavy duty things that you're dealing with there, because you experienced it that intently, and that intensely for that matter, and years ago. Yet from what I read through what you wrote to me, that was very detailed, meaning it stuck with you. It's in your head. You were very detailed with that indeed, because you remember it. And obviously that means it was that important, and it got to you that much that you remember those details to such an extent. I am shocked, because that is a hard one to deal with, because we're not just dealing with one person, folks. We're dealing with multiple people out there. More than one person who shared these experiences all together for the same person. So it all comes back to me so why? Why did everybody need to know, and what was the reason? Especially because it told you. It said that it was there to take someone, but it wouldn't let you tell. Why wouldn't it let you tell them? What was the point of telling you if you couldn't say it? Everything's got a reason, but it's hard to understand what that reason might be. Why did it come to you and them? Why didn't it go to other people? So what is this purpose, and why did it need to stick with you? So many questions, more than answers in this case, because again, you're dealing with the ultimate in the unknown. Rebecca, thank you very much for sharing that with us. That was an amazing story. I definitely look forward to hearing more from you. Everybody out there as well. If you've got your own paranormal experiences to share, please email me. That's info@paranormalperspective.com. You can find me on Facebook as Paranormal Perspective. You can find my website, www.paranormalperspective.com. And you can also find me even on Twitter. That's VJP1982, VIJAY 1982. Lots of ways to reach me, but I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. This is a big topic. That's a heavy one. Lots of things that happen in this one situation, one experience, that leaves so much for interpretation. So everybody out there, definitely email me and let me know what you think. Aside from doing personal experiences from what people have gone through, we can even talk about previous experiences and talk about what other people's interpretations are, because I'd love to hear some feedback as to what you think as well. It's a big topic, it's a big range, and every possible thought process out there is safe. We are open to any ideas, because truthfully no one knows, therefore everything is right. I don't like the idea of everything being wrong, because ultimately we can't say. So I want to hear what you think. I want to hear your experiences. Definitely get those stories into me, and let's try not to disappear for so long next time. I will try to make sure that I keep new stories coming to you regularly, and I can't wait to bring to you another episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for another episode of The Paranormal Perspective, and I look forward to talking to you soon. This is Vijay Prasad again, signing off. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.